Hello, Provo City School District. I am Superintendent Dow. Today is Friday, March 8th, and it is International Women's Day. So I will talk more about that in a moment because we have a very special podcast to celebrate great female leaders within our district. I want to start off by thanking those of you that attended your caucuses this last Tuesday. I know for me, I live up in Salt Lake County, and the caucuses were very well attended. There were actually thousands of people that were showing up in my area at into the different precincts. Then there were several hundred individuals, and so that just really helps us to make sure that we're getting delegates that are education friendly, and that we make sure that everyone is hearing all voices in our democratic system and not just the voices of a select few. So I appreciate those of you who took the time to participate in your caucuses. This past week, we also had the opportunity to meet with our 2 student board members and our student advisory council for the district that's comprised of 9 high school students from Provo and Timpview high schools. And then we also combined that with some of the student leaders at Centennial Middle School. So that was super fun to talk with them, and they were able to ask the high school students some questions about what high school life is like and things to be worried about and things not to be worried about. And it was great to see that interaction and to watch the middle school students really look up to the high school students, and for the high school students to really give some sound advice to the students. It was a great opportunity and experience. I also just want to give a huge shout out to our business and finance department, in particular Devin Daly and Steve Reese. They have been working really hard with our cabinet to ensure that we are budgeting appropriately for next year, looking at numbers of teachers and what budget schools will have based on enrollments and what supports that we can provide. One of the things to keep in mind is that our ESSER funding, which was the special funding that came because of the pandemic from the federal government, has ended. And so that is, that used to supplement our budgets by about $7 million. So as that money is going away, then there are definitely some choices that we have to make as a district, and we definitely want to stay competitive with teachers and employees' salaries. And so really looking at where do we need to make some decisions. And so those are some conversations that we're having with principals, and principals should be having with school leadership teams, and looking at what their priorities need to be based on the needs of the schools. So just be aware of that, and be aware that your principals are trying to make some very hard decisions, and that they really do know your schools quite well, and they're doing all that they can to make sure that you are supported and that the students are supported, because bottom line is student learning is what we're about. So that help is really important. Also just wanted you to know that the WPU that was awarded by the state legislature, that's how much funding we get per student, went up by a very small amount. And so as we're looking at that, we want to make sure that we're trying to funnel as much, if not all of that, towards teachers' salaries, towards employees' salaries, to make sure that we are trying to stay competitive. So I want you to be aware of that these are really important conversations that we're having and will continue to have as we negotiate with our associations to make sure that our employees are taken care of, but we also have the needs of our students met. We know that change is hard. I know that many of you get concerned when you're thinking about, I might have a different principal, or I might have a different assistant principal, or I don't know this individual, or we used to have this facilitator, now we're going to have this coach, or our administrative team is changing somewhat. I want you to be really a person that presumes positive intent from all individuals. We have very talented and highly qualified individuals that have backgrounds that most of us are not even aware of. And so recognizing that they're going to bring a whole skill set to a particular school is really important, and recognizing that we need to give every single individual a chance and not make preconceived notions about anyone's abilities, anybody's background, what they're good or not good at. You develop that relationship with that individual, and I guarantee you they're going to work really hard to make sure that they meet the needs of your schools. So I just encourage you, just like all of us, we want to be given a fair chance when we're dealing with our students, and we want parents to give us a fair chance as a teacher and not make preconceived notions about us as educators. We need to make sure that we're doing that for one another as well. I think that's a really important cultural piece that we need to be very conscientious of in Provo City School District. I also want to give a huge shout out to our music teachers at the elementary level. I was able to attend their music festival at Provo High School yesterday. Just so impressed with the choirs of each of the elementary schools, and just how proud the kids are of what they have accomplished this year. And I was also very impressed with how much the kids from different schools knew a lot of the same music, and there's obviously a lot of collaboration that goes into it. And then when you see the culmination of those efforts as those students move into middle school and high school, the music program obviously is one that is very important, and definitely many people take pride in that, as well as our community does as well. So just wanted to give a huge shout out to all those involved. We know that's a lot of work, and it really was just such a great time, and what a wonderful tradition that Provo City School District has with its elementary students and that music development. I do want you to be aware that on March 12th, we do have a board meeting. There will be an explanation of how we have divvied out FTE. FTE stands for full-time equivalent. That's what we use to determine how many teachers each school gets, what their funding looks like. It's based on usually numbers of students, and then we go in and look at additional factors. Such as does a school have a lot of multilingual students? Does a school have a lot of students that are on free lunch? We do have to add FTE at our dual immersion schools to make sure that we have the dual immersion program covered, that our CAS program is covered. That's our gifted and talented program. So all of these factors we take into consideration. It's also important to remember that our enrollment is dropping as a district. It is not increasing as it is in some districts that surround us. And as a result, when we're funded based on the number of dollars per student, that is why our funding does go down. And so I just want you to know that there will be a discussion about that. If you ever have questions about that, you can reach out to your principal, you can reach out to district leadership. We're happy to explain those things to you. Funding is a very transparent thing, and it's something the public can ask us about, and we have to be accountable with our taxpayer dollars. So we don't discourage questions about why this is happening or why this choice was made. We want to make sure that we are very transparent about those choices and those priorities. You will be getting a survey from me as the superintendent out to each of you as teachers, and then we'll also have a survey for all of our employees wherein you have an opportunity to designate what your priorities are in terms of budgeting, so that I can turn that to the school board as we establish our budget for next year. And I'll ask things like teacher salaries. Obviously, salaries of employees generally tends to be high on our list, right? We also want to look at things like, is smaller class sizes, is that more important? Is it more important to have access to instructional aides? Is it more important to have access to social workers or behavior interventionists? What does that look like? What are the behavior supports that are in place? Is that more of a priority based on what you're seeing at your school? So that we can ensure that we're directing those dollars in the right way. I do know that the association asks those questions as well as they're looking at negotiations, but I really want to have this information so that we have it to kind of inform our budgeting process. So look forward to that survey coming. That should be coming towards the beginning of next week. We will also be discussing the fee schedule for the middle schools and high schools at board meeting with a second reading and hopefully final approval of that. We are also going to be having a final approval of our student travel and our language access policies, with a first reading of policies of our policy on how we are proposing some changes to our student board members, as well as really putting in procedure our student advisory council. As always, we will have a construction update as well, and so there's a lot to look forward to. The study session begins at 4:45 p.m. on Tuesday. It will be in boardroom 1, and the business meeting begins at 7 p.m. in the Professional Development Center. Also, just as a reminder, this weekend, daylight savings time, it's going to stay light even later. but we are all going to lose an hour of sleep as a result of that. So we might all be a little bit sleepy next week, and we know our kids are going to be squirrely as a result of that. So just be prepared. I also want to make you aware, I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but Ramadan actually starts next week. And one of the things that we may not be aware of is students that are Muslim, they fast during the daylight hours, and then at night they have a big meal together as a family. But sometimes those meals aren't starting until 10 o'clock. There's celebrations that go with it, and so we often have students that are a little bit sleepier if they happen to be Muslim, and so they are struggling a little bit more sometimes. And so just being aware of that and cognizant of that, I think, is really important. You can work with your administration if you see something like that and want to provide some support or help, but just being aware of that, I think, goes a long ways so that you're not taking it personally that a student is struggling in that way. So just wanted to keep that on your radar as well. And then with it being National Women's History Month as well as International Women's Day, I just want to highlight our podcast this week. We're going to try to highlight great women in the Provo community. And we started off with Cami Alvarez and Momi Tua, our principals at Provo High School and Timpview High School. It was such a pleasure to speak with them for the podcast and just talk about their journeys as educators and all the great things that they do for our schools and their passion and what inspired them and helped them along their trajectory of success. And I hope you'll pay attention to that and direct some of your students to that too. I think it's good for our kids to see the paths that individuals have taken across our district to find success and how much they care about their employees and their students and their communities. It was just a really great podcast, so I hope you'll tune in for that. With that, I hope all of you have a fantastic weekend. Bye, everybody.